This is the Other 22 Hours podcast.
Hey, and welcome to this week's episode of the Other 22 Hours podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Shafer-Haiss.
And I'm your host, Michaela Anne, and this is our second year of the Other 22 Hours. We're so happy to still be here, and so happy you're here with us, because that's the only reason we're still around.
Yeah, and even though we're still a small show, there is a lot that goes into producing this every week. It is just Michaela and I and our editor holding everything down. And so with that, if you enjoy what we do here, we would love some help from you to reach a wider audience. There are three things that you can do. The first and probably easiest thing to do is to just follow or subscribe on whatever platform you're using to listen to us right now. It takes 2 seconds to just click that, and that will not only let you know when we have a new episode up, but it'll also tell the algorithm that our show is worth 45 minutes of your time, and it'll put it in front of more people. The second thing you can do is to share your favorite episode with somebody that doesn't know what we're doing. Put it on social media. You can play it for a friend, text it to a friend, put it on at the holidays on your TV screen, over the fire, whatever you want to do. And then finally, we like to be able to present these conversations without interruption. And so instead of selling ads, we've started a Patreon community where we offer a ton of things that allow you to go deeper into what we talk about here. Community, headspace, creativity, all of that. You can find more at the link below in the show notes.
We really pride ourselves on these episodes being conversations rather than straight interviews. We are musicians ourselves. We're not music journalists. So these conversations get to feel like we're just sitting around the table after dinner, sharing the vulnerable, honest realities of what it is to build a lifelong career around your art.
And as we all know, there are a lot of things in this career that are outside of our control. Who listens to your record? How many people come to your show? All of that is outside of our control. But what is within our control is our mindsets, our routines, our headspace. And so we distilled all that down into a question that underpins all of our episodes. And that is, what do you do to create sustainability in your life so that you can sustain your creativity? And we had the pleasure of asking that question of Anna Egge today.
Anna has been putting out records since she was 18 years old. It's been 30 years of a career. She's on her 11th record.
13th
record. She has shared the stage with Shawn Colvin, Iris Dement, Sexmith, John Prine, Jimmie Dale Gilmore, and Lucinda Williams, who has called her the folk Nina Simone. She's had a beautiful, long, sustaining career with many ups and downs, and she shared so much. Really, this was one of the more kind of esoteric episodes rather than the nitty-gritty of industry talk, but really talking about meditation, mindfulness, inner work, spirituality, the divine, all the stuff that we both really like to get into.
Yeah, I'll talk about headspace any day, to no surprise of anybody that's heard one of these episodes before. The nitty-gritty that we did get down to was co-writing with your dreams, which is absolutely insane and incredible, and we're both going to try to dive deeper into that and find out more about that. But Anna explains that way better than we do here. And so without further ado, here's our conversation with Anna Egge.
Thank you so much. I know you and I have chatted before this, but we're excited to just dig in and talk about all that is living this life as an artist. And in my research, am I correct that you started putting out records before you were even 20 years old?
Yes. My first cassette, like EP, self-titled cassette came out in 94. So I was 18. I was born in 76. Yeah.
Did you put that out on your own?
I did. I went to Austin and recorded it with Sarah Brown, produced it, the bass player and songwriter. Through her, I met a bunch of folks in Austin, including Dave Sanger, who's the drummer for Sleep at the Wheel. And we recorded it in his garage studio. And he and Sarah brought in a bunch of people to play on it. Lots of folks that were in the Wheel and amazing musicians in Austin. And then Dave started his own label and signed me to that. And so my first album, River Under the Road, came out on his label in 97.
Starting so young, it's always so interesting to me when, even if it's very like indie DIY, of starting to put stuff out like as a teenager and how that kind of informs your brain in a way as you're growing up. Did you go into it thinking, I want to do this for a career, or was it, I love making music and sure, let's record some music?
I think it was both at the same time. I hoped and longed to be able to answer when someone asked me, what do you do? I could say, I'm a musician, I'm a songwriter. Wondered if that would ever be real or true. And I also kind of wondered if it was what I was meant to do or if it was enough to do in the world. But then things just kept happening that seemed to be paving that path for me. I just loved music and I loved writing, and I just started writing songs. I started learning songs on the guitar and mandolin. And then as a kid, I had this awareness that some of these songs hadn't always existed. Therefore, someone made them up. Therefore, maybe I can do that. That simple kind of awareness was a huge shift. My mom was a huge reader and language arts teacher, and she had us kids write in our journals every day. So I had a connection to writing and expressing feelings and thoughts and stuff. And so that just naturally started happening. And then I started having the guts to share the songs that I was writing. Really just didn't know better not to. And had this sense since I was little, like, well, I'm going to do that. I want to figure that out, whether it was sports or skateboarding or trying to learn how to play the guitar.
You skateboarded as a kid?
Yeah, I loved skating. Did you too?
Yes, skateboarding, rollerblading, but on the, I guess, the aggressive side, I guess is what it was called then. BMX biking, like all of those.
Oh, yes.
I obviously never like followed through really hard with one. You know, I got to a point where like I could ollie and I could like sometimes do like a nose grind on something and then I'd switch and then do something else. But I also see, even though I never like really got super proficient on any of those like specific extreme sports, I have always seen a connection between trying to learn a trick and music. I come from more of like a musician side, not a songwriter, and studied like a lot of classical music as a kid. So it was very much like repetition and analysis at the same time. So I just find that intriguing, like the parallels between the two that you wouldn't necessarily see right on the face of it.
Yeah, it's because it's like there's this, I want to do that. I want to be able to do that. And then you keep doing it until you can really pull it off. But then there's always something more that you want to try. And then you're looking back being like, oh, right. Remember when I thought I'd never be able to ollie?
Yeah.
Or, oh, right. Remember when I never thought I'd be able to play a power chord?
Yeah.
Or an F chord? That was a long ass time ago. But remember? Like, yeah, I do remember that, you know?
Yeah. And my experience is they both have the steep and then plateau feel to it, where it's like you're working really hard and things are improving. And then it just, your effort feels the same, but you just seemingly plateau for a while. And then all of a sudden something kind of breaks through and you're like, oh, my arm doesn't cramp up quite as much when I'm playing this bar chord or whatever it is. That kind of dichotomy of the ease and the struggle.
Yeah, and then when you are doing it and it all of a sudden is something you don't have to think about or try for anymore, that sense of knowing that and that feeling of it. It's the same thing with songwriting. You have these ideas or some inspiration or something comes and you work on so many different bits and songs, and then there's the ones that are like, oh, this is happening. This one's good.
Yeah.
And you know it. It's annoying, but it's from the constant doing it that sharpens that edge.
I grew up playing classical piano, and then we both went to jazz school. We went to the New School in Manhattan. And I remember testing into the highest level of piano class, but I didn't know how to play jazz piano. But I went in and played a high level classical piece, and they were like, oh, well, you're in this level. Once I got in there, I was like, no, I'm not. I don't know how to do this. And I had never heard of inversions, playing chords in different inversions. I remember like still the painstaking way of like, I would have to write out the notation for every single chord inversion, like voice leading to the next one, and really do all the mental steps and see it on the page and play it. And then I don't remember when it happened, but now I don't have to think about that. I can play every inversion of every chord very quickly. It's completely second nature. And I always use that as an example of like, I remember what it was like for something to feel so hard and impossible and so tedious. And you do it enough and enough and enough. And now it's just like breathing. I don't even have to look at my hands. That's like the challenge of everything in life. Also being okay to fall, to eat shit sometimes and like get back up.
mountain biking was my kind of extreme sport of choice. And the first time I rode a bike was off-road, and my cousin took my training wheels off and I just went flying down this dirt road, and I was like, that's it, I love it. But in biking all the time, and I biked with my dad and other adults and people that have done it for many decades. And somebody once told me, he's like, the number one thing you can learn about mountain biking is to learn how to fall. Not learn to not fall, because you're going to fall. So you have to learn how to fall, that when you do fall, you don't hurt yourself. And I just think that's such an appropriate metaphor for trying to build a career around your art, is you have to learn how to fall, because there's going to be disappointments. You're going to skin your knees.
Yeah. That is a great analogy. And a great segue to prompt a question that I have.
What's your question?
Well, on that, for someone who has been doing this for multiple decades, have you had times of what has felt like falls or disappointments, or, for lack of a better term, failures, not meeting expectations? And how have you learned over the years to grapple with that?
So many disappointments. This is my 13th record coming out. I don't even know what to say. Like, there's so many byways that I could go down that would be not necessarily helpful. But I think the big thing is that there's different ways to look at success. And obviously, some sort of acknowledgement always feels good. And part of the completing the circle of making music is having people hear it and having other people experience it other than oneself. And so that, of course, is always something that I hope for, is that it reaches people. I've struggled with how to reach people more, with the primary thing being feeling like, I'm happy with being able to continue to make the music that I make that doesn't always fit into specific genres, or being who I am don't even fit necessarily into a specific genre or gender, or being gay, and just all these things. It's kind of like there's not clear avenues always for who I am in the world or what I make in the world, but I always have continued to make this work, and it's a miracle that I've been able to continue to write and make 13 albums and tour and still love it.
I think that's the rocket fuel that you can keep in the tank, being attached to the joy of creating and the love of creating, and not really get caught up in the branches of the commerce end of everything.
Growing up and throughout my life, I've always been, I guess you could say, a seeker, and had a deep connection, real connection to spirit or divine or whatever words work for that. And so when I was saying earlier, I didn't know if music would be, enough or the thing to do, it was kind of that sense of, I don't know if that's really my path. But the writing has always been like a real connection to that way of being, the path, whatever, I don't know. And that feeling of knowing when you know. I guess to go back again, when I was young and I didn't know if that was the right thing, these things kept presenting themselves as obvious encouragement, and people showing up, encouragement with songs, this great guitar maker offering for me to work with him. I built my own guitar with him when I was 16. Things like that are like, well, that's a pretty obvious help. The universe saying something. But throughout this sense of longing and love for others and for the divine, and for many years it was about intellectual knowledge and feeling, like reading every possible thing over the years. So many different, the Bhagavad Gita, the Tao Te Ching, the Thich Nhat Hanh, translations of the New Testament, Apocrypha, Kabbalah, everything. And the beauty that is lived and written and shared. But it was intangible. It was, besides poetry and music that I've experienced, and through love of others and caring for others, and then through writing myself. But like we were talking about with sports, I've always been a very present person in my body, loving sports and carpentry and working with my hands and things, learning by doing. But somehow, it didn't ever really spiritually, it didn't ever really connect that way. But I think when I felt really off the path and that I wasn't, it was when life really hit me hard. I was focused too much on the outside. I wasn't taking care of myself. I wasn't truthful with myself. I wasn't caring for myself enough. I was drinking too much. I was smoking too much. I was wrapped up in the drama of my family. And so a lot of hard things happened to where I then realized I had to deal. And then in dealing through therapy and couples therapy with my wife and just a lot of acknowledgement of suffering and trauma, I got back to where I started from a little bit. This sense of really loving, feeling connected and loving making music. And that sense of knowing and acknowledgement that what is happening is meant to happen. And it's not about how many fans you have. It's not about any of that. I'm not in control of all that. Mm-hmm. And meditation. I started doing the experiment of in my body, the doing, the working on trying to ollie, like the working on trying to observe my thoughts. 2 years ago, every day. And so now I'm meditating twice a day, every day. And, it's extremely humbling practice, but it helps with every single thing. And just like anything you do regularly, the practice opens up and things that you thought you wouldn't be able to do, you can now. This sense of, some people can make up songs. I guess I can do that too. It's so much more playful now. It's like when I was a teenager and I didn't know I shouldn't be able to write a song. I had this idea. And then sometimes it's good and I know it. And sometimes it's not. And I'm like, meh. Yeah. Moving on. Time to make dinner.
Yeah. I have practiced meditation to varying levels of commitment for the last, almost 20 years, probably. That's insane to say. With a hefty dose of on and off. I've been in a much more consistent daily meditation practice for the last 3 months.
Oh, that's awesome.
But it'd been very infrequent for 2 years before that because we had a newborn baby and wrapping our heads around parenthood for the first time, which I did not have time to for like a formal like seated meditation practice. I did a lot of like mindfulness and doing things in presence. And obviously like having a human being that I'm responsible for right in front of me is a good thing to keep you like in the moment. What I realized when I'm like consistently in a meditation practice is that letting go of attachment and like understanding just the transient nature of kind of everything. If I'm having a really hard time working on whatever song that I'm working on, I'm much less likely to get caught in the mud of that struggle and the spiral of it's always going to be like this. It's always going to be hard. Maybe I'm not good. Maybe I should find something else. Like all of that, I'm able to just let it float on by and be okay with choosing something else for the moment.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
The thing that I find so interesting about all of the conversations that we have, and also just I work with a lot of students. I coach songwriting, and a lot of my students aren't pursuing songwriting in a professional capacity. They have other career paths and everything, but it's the same story for everyone over and over again. The story of having to work to stop being so pulled on the outside of how we are received. Who are we to think we can do what we want to do? And I used to think, am I the only one that struggles with this? Is it easy for everybody else? And more, even though I know that's not true. And now I learn it all the time, no matter what, through these conversations, no matter what level of quote unquote success or affirmation or adoration someone has experienced in their life. It's the same struggle at any given point of our relationship to our creativity, our work, our self being pulled and morphed and, maybe abused or harmed by our relationship to the outside, whether it's perceived or real. And I think it's probably harder than ever because we have so much access to the outside world through our phones. We constantly can see what's everyone else doing, what's everyone thinking of me and my perception based on whether I'm getting likes or not, my numbers. Brene Brown has started this new series in her podcast, something about like having a human scale issue of like all of the quote unquote progress we're making with AI and technology and how positive social media and this connection can be of informing us and connecting us. But then also, are we biologically, mentally, emotionally wired as human beings to actually have the capacity to function in this way? I was listening to it, and her first conversation is with Esther Perel, the psychologist. It was fascinating because I feel like sometimes, why is this so hard for all of us? I'm like, it's inherently hard for all of us. And then we live in a society that's built basically to prey on that. Really, in a lot of ways, the technology, listening to you talk is like one of the steps is maybe the acceptance of it's going to take work for me to feel more connected to myself. Sometimes I feel like there's a layer of shame or apprehension or resistance to that of this shouldn't be so hard to just feel okay or feel playful or feel light. And I think the lesson that I keep learning from all these conversations is, no, maybe it is. And how much discipline and intention and conscious planning it takes to get back in touch with what we see, honestly, in our children, in our 2-year-old who's like painting and singing songs and insanely joyful for no reason.
Right. Because she's so in touch with her. That's what you're saying is, I think, which self is the one you want to love? And so what is self-love? Like getting in touch with the self that is a child self, like your daughter. She's not thinking about whether she has any acne or if she's going gray, you know, or if she's gone up a size for her swimming suit. She is not thinking about her exterior, the way she comes off one little bit.
Not at all.
And so self-love, the first step towards that for all of us and all therefore loving others is, I think, going within, paying attention to yourself that is within, that is not the exterior. Who am I inside? And loving that me, that I in thought and action, and supporting that self. The ripples have effect on the exterior self, turns out. And it's not like we're not connected and one and the same, but self-love can't just only be about going to the spa and the gym, because that's the self that isn't as important. Everyone knows people who look beautiful and perfect who are miserable. And we also probably all know people who are not super attractive and joyous.
Yeah.
I mean, that is like the biggest teacher.
Yeah. And I think one of the challenges when you're an artist is you're basically like taking your insides and saying, here, world, I've been focusing on my insides and now I've excavated them and I'm sharing them. And I want to like be strong in this and love this. But also at the same time, I want it to connect. And then it feels so challenging to be okay with it connects with who it connects with. And how to focus the ego driving that, how often you let compliments go in one ear and out the other. But the person who goes to the bathroom during your show or writes a bad review or whatever, those are the things you hold on to. So it's like how to stay so rooted in yourself in that practice. The one negative thing doesn't pull you out of it or change your whole sense of who you are.
Right. And that's still the being rooted in the inner self as opposed to the ego self, because that's the self on the outside is the one that's attached to those things. Again, your daughter's the perfect example. A lot of my deepest, big shifting work has been around being a parent. And my daughter's 10 now, so I've had 10 years of a lot of deep and really difficult shifts, you know, and changes. And it's so much about that. What do you even call it? Like no self-consciousness as far as how kids are in the world. They don't like broccoli. They don't like it. You know what I mean? They're not going to pretend. You know what? That's okay. And it's okay for us to feel that way too. We don't have to apologize. We don't have to fit ourselves into these narrow little weird things. It's, oh my God, how refreshing is it when an adult is like, ew, you know, you don't like that thing.
Michaela mentioned, you know, we went to jazz school and I feel like I'm still struggling with accepting what I don't like. Speaking about art here, where going to jazz school, people were very opinionated on what was good music and what was bad music. And people listening to some really weird music, some of which is great. I like really weird music too. Somebody would have think we were crazy. You know, I was my last 3 years of college, lived with this one particular friend where we would just listen to Balinese gamelan like really loud and play chess for hours. And if somebody walked into our apartment, they'd probably think we were crazy, but I loved it and it was amazing. But some other types of music, way, you know, much more in the like avant-garde, deep downtown Manhattan kind of stuff that like I have friends that would like lose their mind and I would sit there and be like, yeah, and just like not get it. I'm like, you know, I'm abusing myself by trying to sit here and ingest.
Yeah, but it's the vibe of like, I don't need to be offended if you don't love the thing that I love, but also you don't need to insult the thing that I love by sharing that you don't love it. Like that's
Well, I didn't want to be found out. I just didn't believe in myself enough and didn't believe in my opinion enough. I just thought that like I was missing something and I was flawed for not liking that. So like, it's like, no, I like this. This is great.
Oh my God. And I was there listening to the same stuff, secretly being obsessed with Shania Twain. I was like, I, according to these people, have the worst taste in music.
Hey, don't point at me.
But
so many great songs, though.
Yeah. Anyway, it's that just generally that acceptance of your opinion and ownership of your opinion without judgment.
And also knowing that it's just an opinion. There's a reason for why we are who we are, but also it's like being attached to that also is, it's not like I'm going to need to arm wrestle somebody over, you know, that I do like, you know, whose bed have your boots been under, but I by Shania Twain and they don't. I'll be like, okay.
That's fine.
But I really love it. Yeah.
and being open to the change. I can remember I liked Shania Twain because that kind of like was crossover and I grew up hearing that kind of stuff. But like, admittedly, like when we started dating, like I didn't love George Strait or anything like that.
You got into George Strait.
Very much so. And I remember specifically what it was. We were with your parents. We went somewhere in Michigan and we bought something.
It was a CD.
We didn't buy the CD. That CD came with a pair of pants or a hat or something from like,
like a
rural
feed store.
From like a seed and feed store in rural Michigan. And it came with like a 6-song George Strait sampler.
Awesome.
I'm going to say it was in the time that my car only had a CD player, but I have the same car. So it's, you know, in this current time. And it's probably actually still in the CD player. And this was 15 years ago, but it was a long drive by myself and it just clicked. And I was like, this is incredible. And I listened to that thing like endlessly. I went from hating it to being like, this is really great. And so just the openness to like, opinions change.
Also, remembering, I was just telling a student this yesterday, that feeling that you had of like not liking some type of music, a person's music or whatever, and then hearing that same music in a different time in your life and it resonating. Like we have to remind ourselves as people who create music, the same way that we feel about different artists, one of our all-time favorite artists, we might not love every single record they put out, but we're so thankful they're still putting out records. People feel that way about us too, and that's okay. Right. One of the things I wanted to ask you about, Anna, was I don't know if we met before this. I definitely was around you at like different Focal Lines things and back when you had the Stray Birds play as your band. But you and I really more so connected during the pandemic when we were both online doing work with Western State Center, a great nonprofit that at the time was helmed by Eric Ward, working on inclusive democracy. And you do a lot of work that's all connected through your music and art. That's advocacy, activism. Can you talk a little bit about that relationship of, you know, you and I had a conversation about this stuff last week of just how it feels. It almost gives more purpose, symbiotic, like they need each other. And can you expand on that for yourself and how that has grown for you?
Yeah, I used to think of that world as something else and unreachable, sort of in a way that I used to think of as the religious or spiritual life as something that was rarefied or intangible, but not true. They're all so very, very interwoven. They're all so basic about how you live your life and how one connects to other people and what deep values we all have. I think that was the big shift was Eric. I don't remember how he first found my music. You know, he's a huge music fan. Obviously, that's how we all know him. And he told me, you know, a couple of years before that cohort became real, that he wanted to do something like that. And would I be interested? And I just was overjoyed. I was like, oh my God, really? Me? Yes. What? You know? I have so much to learn from you. So as it started to get closer to becoming real, I was intimidated and I didn't know what it was going to be. But it's just so very basic, right? It is absolutely about being honest and caring and loving and how you operate in the world. And it's a lot about unlearning, peeling off these layers of things that we've come to accept the way that things are supposed to or have to be, which aren't based on this inner self of your daughter or this all I need to know I learned in kindergarten stuff. It's not. It's all this imposed BS that's built up about control and greed. It's peeling that stuff off, unlearning as we say, seeing people for who they are. And that means listening to them about what that means about who they are, no matter what skin color they are or how they express their gender or anything. Oh, what's your name? Oh, what are your pronouns? What do you like to do? It's so much more simple than anything that anyone would want to build it into being. But getting to that simplicity can be a lot of work. It is work for all of us, but it can be more work for some. Just dismantling the stuff, all these things that have kept us all away from each other and from our inner selves.
Has that work inspired your music in a different way, or also not just the actual music, but your approach to your music career and your feelings about career aspirations?
I became aware of how few people of color, women, and queer people I work with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've actively changed that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been really cool and very, very active practice, like becoming a part of different communities and showing up in that way. That definitely informs my music too. The more I learn about people's suffering, the more I realize how I do not have anything to bitch about. I mean, literally, I don't.
Yeah.
I have a great life. I grew up really poor and had a crazy family, but man, I have a lot that I can do to help people. And a lot of time I don't know what that is, again, without asking what people want. We're all so much more alike than not. A lot of this new way of writing that has been happening lately for me is, well, maybe it's just natural, but I think it has a lot to do with this practice that I've been doing. I read a book about this inventor and mystic Swedenborg. He did this practice for a while where he would write out his dreams and identify with every person in the dream. And I thought, oh, that's cool. So I started doing that, and I did that for a long time. And of course, the big breakthrough aha things were when I would have a dream that I did not want to identify with the other person, for example, who raped and shot me in my dream. But in writing these dreams, if I'm everyone in my dream, I am this person. I am this person. I am that person. And just like for writing songs, I don't know if you guys feel this way, but when you're actually in that practice, when you're doing it, you're more than yourself when you're not. Something's happening in that action that you can't necessarily think of or access except for when you're doing it. Just like you can't ollie on a skateboard when you're not on a skateboard trying to ollie. It won't happen. So when you're writing, sometimes you write something and you connect and, oh my God, that's the part in my brain. That's what's going on in my psyche that appeared in my dream as that person, as that character. And also like very, very humble. And these are all aspects of the me, the I, whatever. Somehow, I think through that practice, anyhow, at some point, I started becoming aware of music in my dreams. I started hearing it, realizing that I was dreaming, and making myself wake up and humming it into my phone.
Whoa.
And so sometimes that happens, and it's like lyrics and a melody. Then I get to co-write with my dream. It's freaking so cool. And then sometimes I listen to it and I'm like, ugh. Or sometimes it's like, I'm like, is there a melody in there? Clearly, I thought there was.
Yeah.
Because I made myself wake up, and this says 3:22 a.m., of the voice memo. But the majority of the songs I've been writing start with that.
Whoa.
That's incredible.
It's a huge gift. And again, these are the things that I think are connecting the dots towards that happening. But then, of course, there's the craft and the, inspiration of getting to work with those snippets and then finish writing a song. It really is, again, so much more not attached because I'm like, ooh, I'm already listening to these voice memos being like, nah. And then I hear one, I'm like, that's cool. What happens if I'm picking my guitar now and, that's interesting, I get to have an opinion as if I didn't come up with that. Or as if, like when you have someone send you something they want to co-write, it's so much easier to be like, I like that part. I don't like that so much. But if you wrote it yourself, sometimes it's like you don't have that separation, to have an opinion. So that's kind of what's been happening lately.
I really love that. So just to synthesize everything in my head, you came at this by putting pen to paper to identify with the characters in your dreams. And the more that you did that, your awareness of your dreams increased. I love that.
To the point that then you started hearing music.
Yeah, I love that.
Well, I think I always did hear music. I just didn't necessarily know. Part of it, the discipline of making yourself write it down. Not saying, oh, I'll remember it. You won't.
Yeah.
You will not remember it. So you start and you write it down and you show up. Just like you show up when you're doing anything, whatever you've decided you're going to work on, just keep doing it. And so then also making myself wake up. Like sometimes even when it's like, oh, that's so pretty. Oh, I don't want to wake up. And then I'm like, wake up. Like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
This could be great. And then sometimes it's just not. But I still woke up. And I still fell back asleep. Even in that state, this drag, like, oh.
Yeah. I'll remember this.
That just is even more support and evidence for what I was talking about of feeling like, oh, it takes a lot of energy and work to think, feel in the way that like I want to be aware of or want to be. And that also that coming off of you developing a dedicated meditation practice and you're accessing these layers of your subconscious by doing that work that otherwise they would be happening, but you wouldn't be connected to them and you wouldn't be able to feel them and see them. And that's so cool. One side note, I'm going to go back to school for depth psychology of creativity, which is like this like dream type of work. And you just sharing this story gave me shivers of like, oh yeah, I want to know more about this stuff. But
totally.
This weekend, I told Aaron this morning, I had multiple dreams all weekend that were really disturbing to me because it was images of like Palestinians in Gaza. A lot of the imagery that I don't even want to say imagery, what is happening. And real people in my dreams mixed in with like momfluencers that I see on Instagram who are like sharing silly things their kids said or whatever. But it was like all a mashup in this dream. And it like really disturbed me. And Aaron was like, maybe a sign of like scrolling Instagram too much. That and what you just said is a combination of like being conscious of what we feed our minds. Laura Veers was on this podcast as well. And she talked a lot about how she became very aware of like what I take in and having the discipline. Like she got off Instagram, and this isn't to say like get off Instagram. This is just to say, oh, it takes so much energy and discipline to decide what we want to feed ourselves mentally, intellectually, emotionally, and how to keep doing that. And really recognizing it changes what we receive from ourselves, how we feel on a daily basis. And yes, it is a lot of work. It shouldn't be easy.
I put Instagram on and off my phone. When I have a single out or something, I'll do it multiple times a day because it's fun, because it's enjoyable, because I follow so many friends. Do I need to do that? No. And I mostly do not have it on my phone. It's just a time suck. All these things are exciting and distractions and excitement on the outside. And it makes more noise and more things to peel away to get back to that self that we really want to be. And the dreams are a reflection of that. And getting to that place of witnessing all of our myriad selves in our dreams, then we're closer to that child self that's not necessarily so attached to one or the other. We're just witnessing it. We're just like, like what's happening? And yet it's all us. Who else dreamt that? Dreams are amazing. And then there's sometimes dreams are not like that and they're different. Sometimes when you have a dream and you're like, whoa, that was a different kind of dream. Just like how we all have these moments of knowing, whether it's however you want to call it, a psychic moment or like a thing where someone's dying, or like everyone has had these moments, right? Sometimes you have those dreams where it's like, what was that?
Yeah.
And yet you don't have to ask because it is like the deepest communication.
Definitely.
And there's always such I want to say like residue to those dreams. They linger, whether it's like a tangible memory of what the dream was. A lot of times it's like the feeling of that dream radiates for like days.
Yeah. This has been such a cool conversation and not anywhere that I thought it was going to expect to go.
And I love it. It's perfect.
Yeah, I'm curious if you guys ever start doing that dream work. It's so fun. And it's challenging. Like I said, the ones that you really don't want to write are the ones that are, whoa.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Like the uncomfortable Freudian dreams that happen. And you're
I've
like, I don't ever want to think of that, right?
I've had some that I've told Aaron, and Aaron's been like, And I'm like, don't
Yes.
judge me.
He's like, stop talking. I cannot hear that.
Yeah. That's where I like force myself into non-attachment. I'm like, I'm not saving that one in my psyche. I need to eat breakfast with this person for the next 40 years.
Yeah.
Well, Anna,
man.
thank you for taking time this morning to have this conversation with us.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, it was a real pleasure.
Hope to see you in person, but I know we'll be in touch. So thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice to meet you, Aaron.
Yeah,
Bye,
nice
Michaela.
to meet you. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Hey, real quick before we wrap up today's episode, it takes a lot to produce even a small show like ours, so if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider taking a minute to check out our Patreon. There's a lot happening over there, all with the intent of growing our community and offering you more resources to navigate a career based on your art more sustainably. You can learn more at the link in the show notes below. Thanks for being here with us, and we'll catch you next time on the Other 22 Hours podcast.